Hello and welcome to the latest IBAC podcast. IBAC is Victoria's anti-corruption agency and our role is to expose and prevent public sector corruption and police misconduct. My name is Meg Gillespie. Today we're going inside the investigations and exposing how corruption can occur within contract management, along with the tools available to equip the public sector and police to prevent it. Today I'm joined by IBAC Deputy Commissioner Stephen Farrow. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi Meg, nice to be here.
Now, you've worked on a raft of investigations over your 5 years with IBAC, but there has been an area which continues to arise as a risk, and that is contract management. Why is it, do you think, that contract management continues to be an area that's vulnerable to corrupt conduct?
Well, every year the Victorian Government spends many billions of dollars buying goods and services out in the private sector, and often there's a lot of focus on what happens at the initial engagement with the supplier, whether it's going out to tender or a request for quote, that initial interaction and then the sort of the signing of the contract. There's sometimes less attention paid to what happens after that, once the contract's up and running. And that's what we've found in a number of investigations, is where there are real risks that can go under the radar. So it's around decisions to extend the contract, to vary the contract, lengthen the term of the contract. These are all really important decisions, and there should be, and there often is, a proper integrity structure around that, but that's sometimes where the attention lapses, and that's where there are vulnerabilities that people exploit.
And I know that this is a priority area for IBAC. Can you explain what that means and why that is?
Well, look, we're a body with finite resources. As I said, there's many billions of dollars worth of procurement, buying of goods and services across the Victorian Government, on top of all the other work that falls within our jurisdiction. So we have to be strategic about what we can investigate. A lot of our work is about finding ways to prevent corruption from occurring, toughening up the system so that it's much harder for people to engage in corrupt conduct. Obviously, investigation is a really important part of our work. But so we have strategic focus areas where we've identified through our intelligence gathering, through our investigations, through our consultation with the sector, areas that we think are particularly risky, and we'll have a targeted approach to those, at least for a period, to try and really make some improvements.
And what do you think are kind of those key vulnerabilities or behaviours throughout the contract management process that you often find are most vulnerable?
Well, look, we see a few different sorts of scenarios. One is what some people call the land and expand scenario. So that's where a supplier will get a contract initially, and often it'll be a lower value contract. It might be there's a degree of urgency around procuring the particular goods and services, so there might be an exemption to the usual processes. And particularly if they've got someone inside the public body, that's the way that they get in. They get the contract, and then there's the benefit of incumbency. Once you've got the contract, it's much easier then to work on expanding the scope, expanding the value, extending the term, and that's where we see the vulnerabilities really arise. So it's come in a bit under the radar, and then it's expanded without the degree of scrutiny that might otherwise apply.
And are there any examples you might have from investigations that you've been involved in where corruption risks in this area weren't managed, and what happened?
Yeah, well, certainly the investigations are usually where we find that. Often it's because it's a natural human trait to give people the benefit of doubt. So particularly if someone's pushing for an exemption because they need something urgently, they might refer to, it's a big priority for the minister or someone senior. People involved might give the benefit of the doubt. Well, look, it's not clear that the exemption's warranted, but I'm not going to ask too many questions. So one of the risks is around people not asking questions, not being sceptical about reasons that are given for certain things, particularly when there's a departure from process. And also the challenge is that often these are concealed relationships, and so we have to be very mindful of potential red flags. This is where process is such a key, that process is everyone's friend, because good rigorous process that's adhered to, there's a culture of applying the process, means that if there are multiple eyes on something, a division of responsibilities, it's just much harder for someone to get away with corrupt conduct. But conversely, where those things are lacking, then that's where the risks arise, and that's where we've seen things fall over.
And are there any kind of examples that you could speak to?
Yeah, well, so certainly we've had examples of that land and expand type scenario where something has come in as something small and where there are exceptions that have applied so that the usual competitive open process hasn't applied, and then the incumbency means that they've been able to expand. Something else we see is where there wasn't any conflict of interest or relationship existing at the time of the original contract. But in the course of managing the contract, a relationship develops between someone in the supplier and someone in the government. They form a friendship. Often it's a scenario where the person working in government might be looking at a career beyond government, and so they come to an arrangement where they'll give them a favour in terms of their treatment under the contract, and then it'll be reciprocated when the person leaves the public sector and either gets a job with the organisation or with an associated company or consulting work, or there's lots of permutations of that theme. And it's not just expanding the scope, extending, increasing the value, it's also around things like performance under the contract. And so we have had examples where, for example, the person in government has colluded with and facilitated the supplier not providing some or all of the goods or services, or not to the requisite standard. So there's a financial benefit to the supplier, and as I say, there's an arrangement to reciprocate that. So it's not just, as I say, contract variations, but it's also the level of performance under the contract, and that can be a real risk area where they're invoicing for things that either weren't provided at all or weren't provided fully. One example I could talk about is Operation Daintree. This was one of our public reports. What happened in that case was that a union had a discussion with a ministerial staffer about developing a proposal to train some hospital security staff. And following influence from the ministerial staff, the relevant government department went ahead and entered into a contract for that training. It was a big contract. It was over $1 million. And the entity that the department awarded the contract to was a company that had just been established by the union, and some people in the department who were involved had some real reservations about whether that new entity had the capacity to deliver the training, and also some reservations about the process. It hadn't been an open and competitive process. So our report identified a whole range of issues around the entering into and the sort of lead up to the contract, but it also focused on issues that arose once the contract was in place. Because what happened was, in fact, the entity didn't have the capacity to provide the training. It wasn't provided to an appropriate standard. The numbers of people who were trained was much lower than had been expected and required. And there was involvement from ministerial staff that hindered or impinged the ability of the departmental staff who were responsible for administering the contract from taking action under the contract to redress those concerns. So it was really an issue where there were corruption risks at the inception of the contract, and then those risks carried through to the way that the contract was managed and really compounded the problem. So it wasn't just an issue around the entering of the contract, but being able to manage risks as that contract unfolded over time.
And have you had any examples where misconduct or behaviour that could escalate to corruption was identified early through really, really good, robust frameworks?
Yeah, like I say, usually really robust processes mean that it doesn't occur at all. But one thing that's really gratifying, we get a lot of complaints and notifications to us. We sift through them, but often they are from people who've spotted something. They might be a more junior member of staff who's seen something that doesn't quite look right. And it's really encouraging when we see someone come to us to say, look, I've seen this thing, it doesn't look right, I'm concerned about it. It might be involving someone much more senior than them, but where they've been trained around the public interest disclosure scheme, they know that it's safe to come forward, they know which avenues to go, they can feel that they've got protection against retribution from coming forward. So we do see that. That's something we see regularly, and often that's what initiates our investigations, is when someone does do that. So training, awareness, these are crucial things in terms of public sector bodies.
So where would you suggest that agencies, organisations or anyone really should start when it comes to integrity in contract management?
Look, a great starting point is our website. Our engagement team put lots of resources there. So there's lots of e-learning modules, there's written material, there's lots of practical tools, information about the PID scheme and so on. So our website is a great resource. There's lots of other good resources across government, Buying for Victoria, Victorian Auditor General's Office. There's lots of great resources out there to raise awareness around some of the integrity risks, how to deal with it. So those would be great starting points. The other thing is really most of the time a public sector agency will have lots of policies, processes. It's surprising how often people fail to check what the process is, fail to double check, ensure that they know what their obligations are. If someone's not complying, to question it, to call it out. And also things like audits are so important because often it's a pattern of behaviour. If someone doesn't see something really obvious occurring, often it's really when you go back and comb through a pattern of granting exemptions or invoices that are approved without appropriate scrutiny. If there's not double checking by someone separate, those sorts of things are really important. So I think attention to what we know are risk factors and really embedding it in the culture of an organisation.
You mentioned a e-module that IBAC has recently launched as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what it's aiming to achieve?
Well, what it's aiming to achieve, it's targeted at people with financial delegations across the public sector, so people who are involved, not necessarily on a day-to-day basis, but who through their work are involved in the sorts of things which we've identified can present corruption risks. It's a very practical resource, so it has strategies, things to watch out for, but also some concrete examples. It takes about 20 minutes. It's very user-friendly, and we'd really encourage anyone whose work involves contract management to have a look and to make use of it.
Definitely a good way to refresh everyone's memory in terms of what integrity practices can be involved throughout the contract management process. What other work has IBAC done or continues to do in terms of helping prevent corrupt conduct or misconduct in this area?
Well, certainly we learn from our investigations. We can't always publish what we do in terms of investigations, but we try to draw out themes, issues, and then speak to a range of forums across government, whether it's the Chief Procurement Officers Forum, whether it's the prevention activities that we do. So I think this financial year we've done 121 prevention events already. So we speak to stakeholders across government to raise awareness, to draw attention to the things that we're seeing and the things that we think can be addressed. But also we're not the subject matter in every topic in terms of our jurisdiction. Sometimes we'll see something that's really good, it's done well in one area, and we'll try and propagate that to other areas so that others can benefit from what we're seeing works, things that seem to be getting traction and addressing the risks that we've identified.
And if this discussion or this podcast raised any red flags for anyone listening, and they think they might be aware of a contract or a process which maybe has been managed not to the best standard, what would you suggest that they do?
Look, definitely jump onto our website, have a look at the materials, particularly around the Public Interest Disclosures Act, because often one of the concerns people have is what might happen to them if they come forward. So have a look at that, call or email or jump on. There's an online form you can fill out. Even if you don't know all the details, even if you've only got part of the story or it's just an impression, at least if you let us know, we can have a look at it. It might be that we don't have enough to investigate, but it's when multiple people come forward we start to see patterns, and so every piece of information helps. So we'd encourage you to get in touch.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's been great to learn from your work and investigations over the years, and it's so important to identify where corruption risks exist so we across the public sector are empowered to address them. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you're interested in learning more about IBAC's work, you can subscribe to IBAC Insights, our online newsletter, by going to our website. In this newsletter, you'll find the latest news and events, a heads up on new reports, expert commentary, early research findings, and information on conferences and events. You can find any of the resources discussed, including IBAC's contract management e-module, information on investigations, special reports, data research, corruption prevention resources, and more by going to ibac.vic.gov.au.